and then Zeppa would laugh lightly, but the laugh would merge again into the bitter cry, as the thought would recur persistently, "Gone, gone forever!" Oh, it was pitiful to see the strong man thus reduced, and reason dethroned, and terrible were the pangs endured by the pirate chief as he heard and saw. But he had now schooled himself to accept what he called his fate, and was able to maintain a calm, indifferent demeanour before his men. Of course he never for a moment during all that time thought of crying to God for mercy, for as long as a man continues to ascribe his sins and their consequences to fate, he is a rampant and wilful, besides being an unphilosophical, rebel against his Maker. At last, one afternoon, the peak of Sugar loaf Island was descried on the horizon, close to where the sun was descending amid a world of golden clouds. "Which side is the best for landing on?" asked the captain of his mate. "The southern end, sir, which is steep and uninhabited," said Redford. In half an hour they were under the shelter of the cliffs close to a creek, at the inner end of which there was a morsel of flat beach. Beyond this lay a richly wooded piece of land, which seemed to be connected with a gorge among the hills. "Lower the boat," said Rosco. "Have 3 men ready, and when I call, send them to the hold." He descended as he spoke, and approached Zeppa, who looked at him with unmistakable ferocity. "You are going on shore," he said to the poor madman, who seemed neither to comprehend nor care for what he said. "Once again," continued Rosco, after a pause, "I tell you that I had no hand in the death of your son. My men, if they had their way, would soon treat you as they treated him. They want to get rid of you, so, to save your life, I must send you on shore. It is an island, inhabited. I hope the natives will prove friendly to you. I hope you will get well in time. Do you understand what I say?" Zeppa neither spoke nor moved, but continued to glare at the man whom he evidently regarded as his deadliest foe. A touch of pity seemed to influence the pirate captain, for he added in a softer tone, "I would have taken you with me, if it had been possible, and landed you on Ratinga. Perhaps that may yet be done. At any rate, I will return to this island. We shall meet again." At last the madman spoke in a harsh, grating tone. "If we meet again, you shall die." "I will do my best to avoid that fate," returned Rosco with a touch of sarcasm. "Ho, lads, come down." 3 powerful seamen, who had stood at the hatchway awaiting the summons, descended, and at once laid hold of Zeppa. To their surprise he made no resistance. To every one but the captain he behaved like a lamb. Having been placed in the bottom of the boat alongside, with his hands still bound, they shoved off, and Rosco, taking the tiller, steered for the little creek. The instant the keel touched the land, 2 of the men jumped out and hauled the boat ashore. The others assisted Zeppa to land. They led him to a grassy bank, and bade him sit down. He obeyed meekly, and sat there gazing at the ground as if unable to comprehend what was being done. Rosco remained in the boat while a small box of biscuit was conveyed to the spot and left at the side of Zeppa. Then, removing his bonds, the men re embarked and returned to the schooner, which soon left that part of the island far astern. While it receded, the pirate captain kept his glass fixed on the wretched man whom he had thus forsaken. He saw that Zeppa never once turned his head seaward, but, after gazing in a state of abstraction at the ground for some time, rose and sauntered slowly inland. He did not appear to observe the small supply of provisions left for his use. With his chin sunk upon his breast, and his hands clasped behind him, he appeared to wander aimlessly forward until his tall figure was lost to view among the palm groves that fringed the bottom of the mountain. Leaving him there, we shall now turn to poor Orlando, who had been tossed so unceremoniously into the sea. Probably the reader is aware that the water of the southern seas is, in many parts, so much warmer than that of our northern climates, that people may remain in it for hours without being chilled. Hence, natives of the coral islands are almost amphibious, and our young hero, having spent much of his life among these islands, could swim for the greater part of a day without becoming exhausted. When, therefore, he caught hold of the life preserver, as stated in the last chapter, he clung to it with some degree of confidence. But by degrees the depressing influence of continued darkness began to tell upon him, and he became less and less hopeful of deliverance. He bethought him of the great distance they had sailed from Ratinga before the mutiny broke out, and the utter impossibility of his being able to swim back. Then he thought of sharks, and a nervous tendency to draw up his legs and yell out affected him. But the thought of his father, and of the probable fate that awaited him, at length overbore all other considerations, and threw the poor boy into such a state of despair that he clung to the life preserver for a long time in a state of semi-stupor. At last the day dawned faintly in the east, and the glorious sun rose, and Orley's heart was cheered. From early infancy he had been taught to pray, so you may be sure he did not fail at this crisis in his young life. But no answer was returned to his prayer until a great part of the weary day had passed, and he had begun to look forward with dread to the approaching night. As evening advanced, exhaustion began to creep over him, and more than once he felt himself slipping from his support under the influence of sleep. The struggle to retain consciousness now became terrible. He fought the battle in many ways. Sometimes he tried to shake himself up by shouting. Then he again had recourse to pray in a loud voice. Once he even attempted to sing, but his heart failed him, and at last he could do nothing but grasp the life buoy and cling with all the tenacity of despair. And oh, what thoughts of his mother came over him then! It seemed as if every loving act and look of hers was recalled to his mind. How he longed to clasp her once more in his arms, and kiss her before he died! While these thoughts were gradually taking the form of a hazy dream, he was rudely aroused by some one grasping his hair. Sharks of course leapt to his mind, and he struggled round with a wild gurgling shriek, for the grasp partially sank him. Then he felt himself violently dragged upwards, and his eyes encountered the dark face and glittering eyeballs of a savage. Then was Orley's cry of fear turned into a shout of joy, for in that dark countenance he recognized the face of a friend. A canoe full of Ratinga natives had nearly run him down. They had been absent on an expedition, and were alike ignorant of the visit of the free rover and the departure of Antonio Zeppa. Their astonishment at finding Orlando in such a plight was only equalled by their curiosity to know how he had come there. But they were compelled to exercise patience, for the poor boy, overcome by mingled joy and exhaustion, fell back in a swoon almost as soon as he was hauled out of the water. Need we describe the state into which poor Madame Zeppa was thrown when Orlando returned to her? The strange mingling of grief and terrible anxiety about her husband's fate with grateful joy at the restoration of her son? We think not. Ebony, the faithful and sable servitor of the family, got hold of Orlando as soon as his poor mother would let him go, and hurried him off to a certain nook in the neighbouring palm grove, where he was wont to retire at times for meditation. "You's quite sure you's fader was not shooted?" he began in gasping anxiety, when he had forced the boy down on a grassy bank. "I think not," replied Orley, with a faint smile at the negro's eagerness; "but you must remember that I was almost unconscious from the blow I received, and scarce knew what was done." "But you no hear no shooting?" persisted Ebony. "No; and if any shots had been fired, I feel certain I should have heard and remembered them." "Good. Den dere's a chance you's fader's alive, for if dey no hab shooted him at first, dey no hab de heart to shoot him afterwards. No, he'd smile away dere wickedness. Dey couldn't do it." Orlando was unable to derive much comfort from this sanguine view of the influence of his father's smile. Bright and sweet though he knew it to be, yet with the energy